Hello everybody and welcome back to another Ahrefs Studios tutorial. Today we're going to be going into our inventory system and allowing ourselves to be able to create a tooltip. This tooltip allows us to be able to see what this item is, or the details about this item, right? So without further ado, let's get started. Now the first thing we want to do is of course start worrying about creating just the appearance, right? So as you can see here we have this CursorTooltip object, right? So we're going to go ahead and discuss how it's made. So we're going to right click inside of our canvas and we're going to create an empty game object, right? So I create this empty game object and we're going to call this CursorTooltip. Now I'm going to use a ref here because actually I'm going to call it example because I already have my own CursorTooltip, okay? So this is just an empty game object sitting inside of our canvas and we want to be able to add some stuff to it, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to add in an image of some sort, right? So this image basically is like a container for our CursorTooltip, right? So we're going to just call this display. Now, with this display, we can set up the size, and I think that the size should be maybe like 300 by 125, and that seems like a pretty good size. And we can give this, I don't know, some sort of colors as well. So we can just throw something in like that, and then it looks pretty decent, so we'll call it good. Okay? So the next thing we want to do is we want to go over to UI, and we want to create some form of text. And this, of course, is going to be for our title. We can just call it title. Now, obviously, the position that it's in, it's just, it's just there. So what we want to do is we want to simply add in the position to the top of this thing, right? So I'm going to select our display, and I'm going to go ahead and add a component called a vertical box, right? Now, the vertical box allows us to be able to, and I cannot see with my screen in the way, so right here, vertical layout group, and what this does is allows us to be able to automatically fill in where these objects are going to be located. So I'm also going to select my display, and I'm going to make sure that I add in another UI called an image, and this is going to be our container. Okay, so this is basically the details. We're going to grab our display and we're going to make sure we control the width, and we're also going to control the heights, okay? All right, so now we're going to grab our title and let's go ahead and give it a certain size. So I'm going to select auto size and I'm going to change the maximum right here. So let's just say that we want the maximum to be about 32. Yeah, 32 seems to be all right. And the minimum we're going to raise up to about 24, I think. And we're going to just call this is the title, like so. We can go ahead and set up the positions of this. So I'm going to choose the uppercase right here. We're going to choose center, and we're also going to choose the center right here. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to grab our container. We're going to select the color and drop the alpha down to 0. Okay, so this is just my preference. You can do whatever you want with your setup. All right, so inside the container, I'm going to add another vertical box like so. And then we're going to right-click the container, grab UI, and select our text. And we're going to just duplicate these two texts like so. The first one is going to be, of course, your description. And the second one is going to be your value, okay? So we can go ahead and set these up just like the other one. We set them in the center like so. And let's also go ahead and just, I don't know, let's just change up a couple things. So with the value, we're going to go with bold, and we probably want to set both of these up to auto size as well. So we're going to go auto size, grab the value of this one, and we're going to change it down to like 24 as the minimum, and 18 as the minimum, 24 as the max. And on the description, we're going to set this up as a maximum of let's do 28 and minimum of 18, and we're going to set this as a italic, right? Grab our container, make sure that we choose the width and the height of this object as well, and I could just simply say this is a description, like so. It's a description. We can grab the value and we can say gold 1, like so. So now if I go over to our game view, as you can see, we now have a very good looking box, but there are some things that we need to do with this. First off, grab all your text components, roll down to where it says extra settings, and then make sure that this is raycast target as false. That way we don't have to deal with any form of interference with our mouse. Also select your container and your display, and make sure that those are also set to raycast target as false. Okay, so that's all you have to do to set up your cursor tooltip display. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and erase the example because we already have this setup here. So if I actually show you guys this one right here, it's the exact same setup, just maybe a little cleaner. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about the script because that's the only other object that we have on this. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you go over to your item class. So let's go ahead and do that. The item class was created inside of, I believe, 2 videos ago. So make sure that if you weren't following along to go back to those videos and pick that up. But all we're going to do here is we're going to add 2 different variables. So the first variable we're going to add is a string called description and an integer called value. So they're self-explanatory, designed for the tooltip. So, you know, well, maybe even more than the tooltip, but you get what I'm saying, right? All right, so what I want you to do now is go over to your inventory scripts folder and go over to where we have our UI folders. Now, if you weren't following along, that's okay. If you want to put it somewhere else, that's okay too. But this is just where I'm going to be storing mine. So you're going to right click, go over to create C# script, and you're going to call it cursor tooltip. So let's go ahead and take a look at our cursor tooltip. All right, so at the top, as you can see, we have a header called tooltip, mainly because we're going to be using this cursor tooltip for many different things. Like whenever we pick up an object, we want to be able to also display that object using the cursor tooltip. So this is just saying that this is specifically for giving information regarding the stats of an item. Okay. So right here, we're going to have 2 serialized fields. One is called a private integer called child ID. We'll discuss that in a couple minutes. The next one is a private vector 3 called offset. That's sort of self-explanatory. And then, of course, we have 3 TMP text. Now, if you don't have access to this name right here, that's okay. Make sure that you go over to your namespace area and type in using TM Pro, which will then allow you to be able to use the Text Mesh Pro assets, okay? So once you have that done, make sure that you add these 3 different items or variables, the tooltip title, description, and value. And at the way bottom, and I'm going to actually add a little space inside here too, and this is going to be a public boolean called follow mouse. We'll get more into why we have that right now, actually. So right here, as you can see, we created a void update called, well, not called, but you know, inside of our void update, we're basically asking if we're not following the mouse. So if this is equal to false, then we're going to return, meaning that we're not going to have our tooltip follow our mouse wherever it goes. Otherwise, we're going to set our transform.position, which is this game object, and we're going to set it equal to the mouse position plus the offset value. So that's all self-explanatory, so I'm not going to really stay on it too long. All right, so here's where the magic happens with setting up the display. So all you need to do is create a public void called display tooltip. This is going to require 3 different conditions. One is a string called title, one is a string called description, and one is an integer called value. Now, depending on what you want to display inside of your tooltip, you'll also need to add those items to here as well. And just like so, we're just going to set the title, we're going to set the description, we're going to set the value, and yeah. Also, we need to make sure that we get the transform.getChild, and we're going to select the child ID. Now, to get the child ID, we're simply going to ask for an integer value, and that's the reason why we created this child ID value. Now, whenever you're running through a get function or getChild function, what we're doing is we're simply setting up an array for all the objects that are inside of a transform, right? So whatever children objects are inside that transform, we're going to basically set up an array for that. So as you can see on the left side of the screen over here, we have 2 items inside here. So this top item would be item 0, and this second item would be item 1, okay? So we want to be able to get item 1 for the tooltip, but that just depends on where you have your setup, so that's the reason why I created it as a serialized field, okay? We're going to set the game object .setActive as true, which now means that we're displaying it, okay? All right, so the next thing that we have, of course, is hide tooltip, which is simply doing the exact same thing. We're going to get the child, get the game object, set active as false. Okay. And lastly, we're going to basically hide all the tooltips, which means that if we have any form of tooltip that's active right now, we want to be able to hide it. So we're going to do a for each loop. We're going to find the transforms called children or child in our current transform object. Okay. Then we're going to grab the child and we're going to set it active as false, right? That way it disables the object. All right. So that takes care of that script right there. We're going to hit Control S and then just make sure that whenever you come back over here, you're going to select your cursor tooltip and you're going to add that cursor tooltip script onto it. All right. So once this decides to compile, we're going to do that. Okay. Now, whenever we assign this data and all, it's most of it, actually all of it is self-explanatory if you were following along whenever we were setting up our display tool. So just simply drag and drop the items that you want into that object and it should be all good. Okay. All right, there it goes. Okay, so let's talk about what we need to do next while it's still compiling, okay? So we also need to be able to create some form of game manager which allows us to have access to these objects, as well as, of course, our slot inventory script as well. Well, and then, of course, it does this. Okay, well, whatever. So, yeah, just make sure to drag your tooltip on there. For your title, make sure that you grab your title, drop it on there. Description, description, value, value, and then just set the offset value wherever you want it to be. I set mine to -125, which drops it below my mouse cursor. And then, of course, our child ID is equal to 1, basically saying the second item inside of our children. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and head over to our slot or inventory slot script. This is something that we also need to add, which will allow us to display this information. Actually, before we get over to the inventory slot, I can't even talk. But before we get into the inventory slot data, we're going to go over to the game manager data. Now, if you don't have this game manager class, that's okay. Go over to your scripts folder. You're going to right click and create a folder called managers. And then inside there, you're going to create a C# script called Game Manager. Okay. Now, just like with any form of game, I always make sure that the Game Manager is a single instance, which means that we can call it from anywhere. Okay. Now, you don't want to use this method too often, but it's definitely useful for the Game Manager. Okay. So that's just that right there. Inside this header, we do have a inventory management right here, which simply is just a description for me. If you want to add that there, you can as well. We're going to get a public cursor tooltip, which is the script we just created called CursorTooltip. Okay. Then we're going to create a game state. And to get this game state, you're going to go down outside of this class right here. So if I actually close up this class of Game Manager, as you can see, we now have this system.serialize, and we have a public enum called game state. Okay, so this allows us to be able to determine what sort of game state we're in, whether we're in UI only or game only. If we're in UI only, we want to be able to display certain data, and if we're in game only, we want to be able to display certain data. So this is just a helper for that. Okay. All right, so once you have that script down there built, make sure to just serialize this, set this as a private game state, and we're going to call it game state, like so. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but you can go ahead and write that in for now inside of your void start. That's just simply setting up our game state whenever we start the game. Okay, so here's our public void called set game state. It's going to require a game state, and it's going to be set as a new state. Okay. From here, we're going to set our current game state of the game equal to our new state. Okay. Then we're going to do a switch gate here, as new state is going to be our condition. And from here, our case is going to be if we're in game only or if we're in UI only. So whenever we're inside the game only, we want to be able to grab our cursor tooltip. We're going to set follow mouse is equal to false. We also want to grab our cursor tooltip and we want to hide all the tooltips, okay? We're then going to set our cursor visible equal to false. And we're also going to set our cursor lock state as locked. Otherwise, so inside the UI only, we're going to set our cursor tooltip dot follow mouse, and we're going to set is it visible as true and our lock state as none. So that's just a very basic description of how you get that set up. And of course, we're going to do more inside the game manager, but for now, that's all we're going to do. Okay. All right, hit save, and then we're going to go back over to our inventory slot. Now, you're going to need this library here, so make sure to add using Unity Engine.Event Systems, like so. And you're going to simply add these interfaces. Now, if you don't know how to add these interfaces, simply put a comma next to mono behavior and then type it in like so. So we're going to be using mainly today the iPointer enter handler and the iPointer exit handler. In the next video, we're going to be using the iPointer down handler as well, but today we're just going to be focusing on these, okay? So on the pointer enter, we want to first ask if the data.item is equal to null. If that's true, we're going to return, which means we're not going to do anything. Otherwise, we're going to grab our GameManager.instance. We're going to get our cursor tooltip.display tooltip. So we're basically saying we want to display it whenever we enter the slot, right? We're going to set the name equal to the data.item.name. We're going to set the description like so. We're going to set the value like so. And of course, like I said, if you added any other information to your item class that you wanted to be able to be displayed, that's also where you're going to be adding it as well. Okay. Of course, on a pointer exit, all we're going to do is do the exact same thing, except we're going to make sure that we go over to the cursor tooltip and we're going to say hide tooltip, like so. Then we're going to create this public void called on update slot display. So I actually think we already did this. Yeah, we already did that a while ago. Yeah, so that's nothing new. So yeah, you just want to get these right here, like so. Let me actually put these below this. That way, you know, we're not dealing with that confusion there. So yeah, just add these two right here, and then you should be good to go. Okay. So let's go ahead and close those up. And I'm going to actually create a region for this. So region called interactions. And let's go ahead and close up that region like so. There we go. All right, so now since we have that set up, everything should work. So go back over here into Unity. Make sure that you go over to your game manager first off. If you don't have a game manager script, or not script, but game object inside your scene, that's simply just an empty game object that is inside your hierarchy, okay? And all you're gonna do is drag our game manager script on there. So right click inside your hierarchy, create that empty game object, then drag your game manager script onto there like so. As you can see, we could see if it's UI only or game only, and we're gonna select game only starting off, and make sure that your cursor tooltip is equal to your cursor tooltip like so. So now if we press play, everything works exactly the way we wanted it to. So let's go ahead and see how things work. So the cursor should disappear whenever we start. As you can see, it disappears. If I press tab, the menu pops up. It doesn't display anything if there's no item inside there. If there is an item inside there, it will display that information. If we change what that item is, so let's go over to here and let's just add an apple there like so. And we'll set this equal to 10. So let's come back over here, pop that up. As you can see, we now have an apple, an orange, and the information is different as well. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos. If you have any questions or things that you want to add to this particular inventory system, make sure you leave those inside the comment section below, and I'll be happy to get to those as soon as possible. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.